Hey there, guys. Pat from Intergrowth here. I have been doing a whole bunch of testing on ChatGPT Search, the brand new search engine functionality that ChatGPT released just a handful of days ago. Had some very interesting findings specifically on the e-commerce front that I wanted to talk through here. A lot of this can be applied to other industries as well, but for now, we're going to speak specifically to what I'm currently seeing from ChatGPT Search when it comes to e-com businesses. So what we're seeing right here is a breakdown of the response that we get specifically from an e-commerce related query, very like commercial intent centric query. Where can I buy a good pair of jeans online? So the response format is very similar to the standard styling that I've spoken about on LinkedIn in the past. Start out with a 1 to 2 sentence summary talking about finding a good pair of jeans in this case. From there, we have a recommendation about 5 different brands, typically with a 1 to 2 sentence summary about each of those brands and what are some of the things that make them unique, and a little image of each of those brands as well. So we have 5 brands that are featured in here. And then from there, we have a breakdown about really just advice about how to go about finding a great pair of jeans. And we have a breakdown for all the different sources in here. At the top, we have a list of any of the sources that are specifically being cited up here, listed in this citation section. Then you scroll down a little bit further and we see additional sources that really are just additional pieces of information for us to reference in this search results section. So a few things that stood out to me. The first is I wanted to ask, why did they recommend Nordstrom, which they had listed right in position number 5 here for their recommended brands? I asked, why did you recommend Nordstrom instead of Lee, just another jean company? First thing that really stood out to me is ChatGPT jumped in immediately and apologized for their oversight of not considering my locational bias. So I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, exactly as they said. So this tells us 2 things. One, ChatGPT has the ability, or ChatGPT Search, excuse me, has the ability to understand location information about searchers and has the ability to incorporate that into the search results data to provide a more personalized experience. Based on this, we can see that at least at the moment, this is not being a primary consideration. ChatGPT didn't say, okay, this individual is based in Stockholm, Sweden. Why don't we find 5 brands that are really good for this person to shop at? We can see there's no Swedish brands that are listed on here. There are no brands that specifically speak about international shipping. But we can see that when I specifically question why it chose one source or another, it starts thinking about some of these other secondary factors, such as my locational bias and how that might skew some of the information. We can see they jump in right from here talking all about Lee's European store and how this could be a really great option for me as an individual. Now, with that, I wanted to disregard that. That's not what I was going for. I wanted to get more context into why is Nordstrom being recommended instead of a company that actually produces jeans. So I said, okay, please disregard any locational bias. Just why did you recommend Nordstrom instead of Lee? Ultimately, they break down additional information about here's the pros and cons of each of them. I wanted to clarify it a little bit further, though, because this didn't really give me the answer I was looking for. I specifically asked what led you to recommend Nordstrom instead of Lee in your original response. They provide more context right in here, ultimately providing some additional information, really highlighting the fact that Nordstrom has a wider variety of brands to highlight. Now, what we can actually see is when we ask specifically about why Levi's is being recommended above Nordstrom's, ChatGPT jumps in and gives a very interesting statement and bolds that statement in particular, saying Levi's is an iconic denim brand with broad appeal. So, a couple things we can take away from this. One, if we return to this original list up here, we can see that in this list of 5 recommendations, there are a handful of jean brands that are being showcased at the very top of this list. We have Levi's, we have Madewell's. On the other hand, if we scroll a little bit further down, we have ASOS and we have Nordstrom featured in there as well, more so a retailer that's offering a lot of different jean brands. So if we jump down to this final response from ChatGPT, a couple things we can take away from it. ChatGPT is choosing to highlight Levi's above Nordstrom's because they perceive Levi's to be an iconic denim brand. Now, to me, what stands out here is ChatGPT is saying, hey, this is one of the most prominent brands we think of when we think of jeans, so we're going to recommend them first. Now, what's also interesting to see, though, is they elaborate on their response, providing more justification for why Nordstrom is still included in the list. And if we scroll up a little bit, what can really stand out to us in here is they feature a handful of very prominent jean brands. They have some brands that are missing. They're not highlighting Wrangler in here by comparison, but they start out by saying, here's a few prominent jean brands. And then on the other end of the spectrum, here are a few radically different results that are also very reputable sources. Now, I have a lot of takeaways from this, but one of the first things that sticks out to me is the increasing importance of brand positioning as we enter this new chat GPT and AI centric era. What we can see right here is ChatGPT is saying, here's 5 reputable brands, but they're breaking it into 2 very different types of results. They're saying, here's a few jean brands in particular, and then here's a few retailers in here. So what does this tell us? If you are offering a product or if you're offering a service, differentiating your brand from the competitors now presents a massive opportunity to better be featured in these types of AI search results, as we can see that they're trying to account for multiple types of results if there isn't very specific positioning that's requested in here. All I asked was, hey, I want a good pair of jeans. We can see that they list out a few jean brands, and then they list out the exact opposite. They list out retailers that have a wide variety of jeans. So if you are trying to figure out whether you should narrow your positioning or whether you should stay broad, put this in the box in favor of narrowing your positioning. If you can narrow your positioning and really qualify yourself in terms of how you're different and how you're uniquely better than your competitors, you're ultimately opening the door for any of these AI engines to start recommending you in line with some of your other competitors and leaving you far more likely to get recommended for that unique positioning statement that you have, as opposed to your competitors who maybe are just trying to fit in with the masses and provide a much more generic positioning to have broader mass market appeal.